Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, HFIS, the letting surgery, helping you get it right. We're pleased to say over 500 letting agents have registered for this webinar, and we're doing these webinars every quarter. HFIS is an agent advice line, making sure that you are getting it right when it comes to acting for your landlords. What I wanted to do was just give you an introduction with regard to some of our products at Hamilton Fraser. We have several brands within the private rental sector. One of the brands is Total Landlord Insurance, where we insure landlords' properties. We do a lot of landlord insurance for the National Residential Landlords Association. We own Landlord Action, which was a company that I founded in 2000, where we help landlords with problem tenants and agents with problem tenants. And we own My Deposits, the deposit scheme. We protect over £1.2 billion worth of deposits, acting for agents and landlords up and down the country, as well as other government schemes that we run is the property redress scheme. There's only 2 redress schemes out there. Property redress schemes, we have over 18,000 letting agents that are members. I'm sure a lot of you people that are registered on this webinar are members of the PRS or use My Deposits. And we also have a third government scheme for letting agents, which is Client Money Protect, making sure that obviously you have client money protection insurance in place. And we have over 4,500 members, as well as we own Landlord Zone, which is the leading breaking news landlord portal out there, and that was established in 1999. So in as a whole, we act and touch about 500,000 landlords out there, as well as over 21,000 letting agents for the group. So we have bags of experience within the private rental sector. Just a little bit of background with regard to HFIS. Some of you will be members, some of you aren't members. In this day and age, renting a property for landlords is the hardest it's ever been, and I recommend, and I go up and down the country advising landlords they have to use a letting agent. A landlord is mad to fully manage a letting agent nowadays, especially being new into the marketplace. And as a letting agent, if there was ever a time you needed an advice line, it's now. You need that support to make sure you're getting everything right and making sure you're fully compliant, because of course one of the hats you wear as a letting agent is you are a compliance officer as well. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to introduce my guests, people that are running HFIS, that are on the coalface and speaking to letting agents. Firstly, Mike, introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Mike Morgan. I'm the HFIS team leader. I'm a solicitor by profession. I've worked in the property sector for getting on for 20 years, alternative dispute resolution. And one thing that's taught me is it's much better to get advice and get it right before it goes wrong, rather than try and fix it afterwards.
Yep. Can I just confirm, are you happy with the sound out there? Just make sure if you could just give us some feedback. We just want to make sure sound wise you are hearing us loud and clear. Julie, please introduce yourself, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Ford. I'm one of the advisors on the HFIS advice line. Personally, I've got over 30 years experience in the lettings industry. I'm a former specialist advisor for the Citizens Advice as well, and my role there was housing and homelessness, and I've also got extensive experience of running my own letting agency business.
Brilliant, great space. And I've been helping landlords for over 30 years as well. I started Landlord Action in 2000. I've been in the legal profession. I'm also a landlord, and I sold Landlord Action to Hamilton Fraser in 2017, and I'm Chief Commercial Officer for the group of Hamilton Fraser, and I do a lot of press and PR, and some of you might have seen me around on the circuit. So without further ado, I wanted to, I think this is a very hot topic and very close to my heart and Julie's heart, especially when it comes to possessions, Section 21, evictions. You can see the Form 6A. I actually gave some advice on that when that first came out, and gave evidence under the Deregulation Act, which feels like years ago, doesn't it, Julie?
2015.
2015. I gave evidence in 2014 relating to retaliation eviction. So let me this is going to be very conversational webinar. If you do have questions on some of the topics we're talking about today, please put it in the chat box, and then we will obviously post those questions after we've done this presentation. We want you to get as much as you can out of this session, and we're going to give you all the updates of what's happening out there in the marketplace, especially with the Renters Reform Bill coming in, being the biggest change in 30 years. So the current situation for landlords, I'll throw this over to you, Mike, with regard to Section 21, and presumably calls you're getting on your advice line. Give us an update.
Well, it's still a hot topic for agents, landlords that are phoning us. We still get a lot of questions about when to serve, how long, how much notice to give. It's still lots of uncertainty around that. We sometimes get people who are coming back to us with the changed notice periods that were in coronavirus and not picking up that they've gone back down to 2 months. So I think it's always going to be a hot topic. It's still obviously I was going to say much loved, might not be the right expression by everybody, but certainly for landlords and agents, it's a very useful tool. It's a very common tool. So obviously following with interest what's going to happen under the Renters Reform Bill, whether Section 21 will be dispensed.
Well, we know it's going to go in next year. And we know there's going to be a government, a new government most probably coming. I think that's nailed on, isn't it, Julie? Maybe Q4 this year, Q4 next year, or Q1 2025. I've done lots of work relating to Section 21, done some a lot of advisory work, and we know Section 21 is going to go. What update do you have for our people that are online now, Julie?
Well, the most important thing that I would say is at the moment it's still a bill. So don't panic at this moment. We've got to wait for it to get into being an enacted act before we need to really concern ourselves with what the situation is. But with Section 21, as Paul has said, we know it's going to be abolished, but don't panic. Because what we will see with the Renters Reform Bill is the Section 8 that we currently use will be updated and will ensure that you can still serve Section 21 when landlords really need it. So when they want to sell, when they want to move back in, or when they want family to move back in. Those those grounds will also have terms and conditions with them, as we do right now with the grounds that we use under Section 8. And all of that will become in a bit more detail as the bill moves itself through Parliament.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, I've like I said, I've been involved in quite a few white papers, and I do a lot of work with the Lettings Industry Council. We produced a white paper prior to COVID in 2019, where we got the London School of Economics to give some evidence. It was a 70-page report. There's and I went to my local MP and I got her to raise in the King's Speech, that was Theresa Villiers, that how bad the court system is. You know, someone that's still, I'm running landlord action. We do 2,500 to 3,000 instructions a year. We've got 23 staff here in our HQ at Hamilton Fraser. The courts are the worst they've ever been. Landlords need confidence. You know, there's also a problem with regard to antisocial behaviour. There's no detail relating to that. And obviously, landlords use Section 21. Mostly now we're seeing a record amount of landlords selling properties. We're seeing that on the coalface. Landlords still use Section 21 because there's rent arrears, because they just want their property back. But you know, the courts are at breaking point. They're trying to employ about 1,000 new judges, so it is a worry. And you know, with regard to the legislation, and I think what's really hit landlords has been obviously the increase of interest rates and non-variable rates and fixed terms coming to end. And it's been a real struggle for landlords. I think 2024 is going to be tougher as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Section 24 as well had a huge impact for landlords with the tax element there. And I think it was just one of those perfect storm situations where this is kind of a bit of a straw that breaks the camel's back for some landlords out there.
Yeah, and property management is hard as it's ever been.
No, I think that's right. I think it's also worth just adding, though, just as a bit of comfort, if nothing else, the government's last word is that they're not going to, although the legislation will come in at some point, they're not going to proceed with Section 21 or abolishing Section 21 until the court reforms have.
But how long's a piece of string, Mike?
No, I know.
I'm sounding a bit cynical. I do apologise to the audience. Been there, done that, worn the t-shirt, and that's why people have come onto this, because we are giving advice. We know what's happening here, because we run all these various different government schemes, running a law firm. It's Section 21. They call it non-fault. There's always a fault.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a massive problem. And of course, with your background with regards to giving advice on homelessness, still councils, Julie, are telling tenants to stay put.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. And we know that, you know, 5 or 6 years ago now, when Brandon Lewis was actually the housing minister, he wrote an open letter to all the heads of council, actually saying, please don't do this. But councils are still doing it. And there's a number of reasons for that. Yes, it's in the legislation. The councils don't actually have to do anything until the tenant is 56 days threatened with homelessness. But also, it's their own resources. They don't have the housing staff to be able to work with these people. And on top of that, the councils don't have the housing stock.
And that's why all the hotels are booked up.
Absolutely. And interestingly, it was sort of the double-edged sword almost. Those people that are in homelessness from the private rented sector are actually then, when they're housed by the council, are then put back into the private rented sector, because that's where the councils are discharging their duty. So it all goes full circle.
I know it's look, having 16 housing ministers in 13 years doesn't help. You know, there actually should be a professional housing committee, cross-party, that should actually show some stability. I think there has been a win in the autumn statement, which has been the unfreezing of LHA rates.
Absolutely. I think it's been a long time coming, and it will have an impact, and it will be a positive impact. But I think it's still going to be quite difficult to get those local housing allowance up to where the market rents are at the moment, because bringing them up to the 30th percentile, which is what the change will bring, we'll still see a lot of areas having their LHA rate, the local housing allowance, lower than the standard rents out there anyway.
I mean, look, we're not teaching you agents to suck eggs. It's the hardest it's ever been for renters, for tenants. You know, tenants on average are paying 35% of their wages towards rent. I really feel when Section 21 goes, the reality that will happen is that when they announce the abolishment date, which is either in April or in October, there will be landlord panic, because landlords think, I'm not going to be able to use it.
Absolutely.
So they will serve notices for the sake of serving notices, which means good tenants are going to be told to leave, possibly. And of course, you know, historically landlords haven't put rents up. They were forced to put rents up with the Liz Truss debacle of the budget, which has happened. But yeah, we've got to watch this space. But I think what's really important for you agents is to calm landlords down. It's really important to dampen down that landlord panic, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah. It's happening, but it's not happening for a good time yet.
Yeah, okay. So what I want to do is, and I think when we were talking about the slides, I think what was really important was to emphasize what type of calls you're getting on the advice line, speaking to agents on a daily basis. So what I think what's I've got a real soft spot for HFIS, because it was my idea. For my landlord action days, we had a free advice line. And for me, it was very clear there needed to be a letting agent and advice line. When I joined Hamilton Fraser, when I was speaking to Eddie this year, I said, we need to bring an advice line out, especially now with the legislation change. And Julie, I've known you for donkey's years, and Mike, you came along and made this happen for us. But what we did do was, when we started HFIS, we wanted it to be a really practical advice line rather than legal advice line, didn't we?
We did. So one of the things that we've really set ourselves apart on is that all the people that answer the questions have first-hand experience of running lettings businesses. They're not just legal beagles. They if you like, walk the walk.
They walk the walk. So what I'm going to do, because we've got loads of questions, we're ramming a lot into an hour, most definitely. So I'm going to alternatively, I'm going to ask you the questions, and you can just give snap answers. Okay. There's not one for what's the 6 numbers for the lottery on Saturday, so you don't have to answer that one. Okay. So number one, Julie. Increasing rent during a fixed term 24-month AST at a break clause.
Okay, the answer to that is no. A break clause is simply there to break the contract. If you then don't use the break clause, that 24-month contract continues. So a landlord can't increase the rent at a break clause. It's not an opportunity to change the clauses.
Right. Mike, taking over management from another agent, which happens a lot.
Yeah, so I think we're commonly asked, I don't know what to do. What do I do? So most important thing, communicate. Give the right notice to the tenants, so that and the landlord as well, so they know who the new managing agent is. You don't necessarily need to do a new tenancy agreement, but you might want to, if your tenancy agreement names the agent as the old agent and refers to their involvement in the protection of the deposit.
But I think also what does happen is, when an old agent is disinstructed because they've had a fallout with the landlord, we get a lot of those complaints. I mean, we get a lot of complaints about poor management services at the PRS. 25%, I think, of our complaints is poor management service, where landlords or tenants are complaining about the managing agent. If there's a gripe, the old managing agent won't give the information forthcoming, that's part of a problem as well, isn't it?
It is. It is. So we can guide you on how to find out about the protection of the deposit and the steps that you need to take to correct that. But as I say, it all comes back to communication. I think so long as people understand why you're involved, what you can do, what you're maybe struggling with, they'll roll with it a lot better. Most important thing is answer their questions, keep talking.
Okay, and access, Julie. Access is a real bugbear. I mean, I actually put it forward to the committee that actually access should be a ground. A ground for breach of tenancy under the new grounds for Section 8. Access for viewings in the last 2 months of a tenancy.
Yeah, now this is one that we get more often than any other question, and 9 times out of 10 it's actually written as a clause into the tenancy agreement that the tenant must give access in the last 2 months of a tenancy. The problem you have there is an assured short hold tenant has exclusive possession, so they can actually refuse you that access even though it's a term in the tenancy agreement. Now, your only real recourse to that is serving them a Section 8 using ground 12, which is a breach of tenancy. Then you've still got to go through the court process anyway, so it's kind of a waste of everyone's time and effort.
And then trying to get to the court, paying all that money, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's why Section 21 has always been a backup plan as well. And that's going to go, unfortunately. Mike, selling a property with tenants in situ.
So I think the confusion that arises here is that because a landlord is selling a property, sometimes agents think that that brings the tenancy to an end. It doesn't. They go with the property unless their tenancy is ended. So I think the best approach to this is to talk to the landlord, talk to the tenants early, find out what they want to do. Do they want to stay at the property? Do they not want to stay? But I think, again, the main thing is to bear in mind that you can't just hoof them out because the landlord wants to sell.
I think if they're investment properties and they're good tenants, then other landlords are buying other landlords' properties. Whether there needs to be an increase in rent, that's another conversation. But look, I think if there was ever a time that I did feel for a tenant, I mean, it's now in all the years because of the rental stock crisis, and that it was always on the cards. And I remember saying even before COVID, I mean, I was even highlighting it to MPs, and then I got to see my MP 3 years later after COVID and all these landlords coming out. Julie, next question I wanted to ask you is using Section 8 for more than just rent arrears. Is that often used?
Yeah, and this is where I think a lot of agents don't realise that Section 8 has 21 different grounds that you actually have.
But they're going to change in the new world.
It is going to change in the new world with the Renters Reform Bill. We'll have more, but it isn't just available just for rent arrears. That's only 3 of the grounds, which is 8, 10 and 11. You have a lot of other grounds that you can also rely on, including stuff in there if unfortunately the tenant passes away, or if you need to have the landlord move back in because they used to live there as their primary home. So there's also ground 12, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, and that's any other breach.
Yeah, but that needs to be totally updated and more specific.
It really does. It is antiquated for where we are right now because it's a discretionary ground.
Outdated.
And that's the other thing that you have with Section 8. You have the first 8 grounds are mandatory. So basically the judge has got no option. He's got to award that possession.
Upon evidence,
Upon evidence. And then grounds 9 through to 17Z, I think it is, they're discretionary. So basically up to the judge on the day to decide if eviction is reasonable.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, a big problem that has happened, and I've highlighted it on Nightmare Tenants, has been subletting, rent-to-rent subletting,
Big
all
problem.
that. Massive problem. I mean, I remember doing an interview in 2013 on CNN with Richard Quest when Airbnb came to the UK in 2011, but 13 it kicked off. And I was saying that it's going to be a good choice for landlords because obviously what the tax breaks are, I think, will come to an end. I think there's going to be more regulation like that's happening in Edinburgh and in Scotland. But it was always going to be up for an abuse because, of course, if you've got a tenant there, making money out of residential property is easy because it's a simple matter. So I rent my property to you. You're in the middle of Canary Wharf, and then you end up doing a rent to rent or subletting, and then of course you're in breach of head lease. We see a lot of that, but we have to rely on ground 14. But in Section 21 goes, it's going to be more challenging. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, that's really fair to say.
Yeah. Okay. Last question on this page, Mike, is when and how do you use a Section 13 notice?
So Section 13 is a notice to increase the rent. The most important thing to bear in mind with this is that you use it during the periodic tenancy. So after the end of the fixed term, you can use a Section 13 notice.
And what period do you have to give?
A month's notice.
It's a month's notice.
At least a month's notice, telling the tenant what you propose the rent increase to be.
Okay, and then in the new world, then you'd have to go to the first tier tribunal, don't you?
So you'll still be able to serve Section 13.
Yeah.
The changes are it will now be 2 months' notice.
Yes.
But the tenant, as they can now, can go to the first tier tribunal and argue that that rent increase is too high.
Yeah.
I think just to add to that, the question that we commonly get is that people want to increase rent during the fixed term.
Yeah.
So you can do that
possible
if your tenancy agreement allows you to, but if it doesn't, you've got to wait till the end of the fixed term. And if you can't reach agreement, use a Section 13.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right, we've got some questions from some members.
We have.
We go. So the first question is for you, Julie.
Yeah.
Okay. A question for Mary. The tenant has passed away. Can we re-let the property?
No, is the very short answer to that. Just because the tenant passes away, the tenancy itself doesn't end. The landlord still has to go through the normal processes. Now, a landlord can serve a standard Section 8 notice. Again, we talked about that with regards to the tenant passing away. That's a 2 months notice. They can also serve a Section 21 if they wish. But the easiest way to deal with it is work with the next of kin or the estate that's looking after the person who's looking after the estate.
But you've got to get that information, which is challenging.
But you've got to get that information. We do actually have a very detailed guide on our website for members about that.
So let me that's a good plug. Right, I'm going to talk about the guides. You guys write some brilliant guides, and they're very popular, aren't they, with members?
Yeah. And the thing is, they're in response to the questions that we get.
Yeah.
So they're based on your problems. They're not based on the sort of textbook approach.
Yeah.
You tell us a problem, we give you the guides and the answers that's shaped around them. So it's real world practical guide.
We call it a surgery. It's not like embarrassing bodies, is it?
Well, it can be sometimes.
Oh, can it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a little bit before the watershed. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Thank you for answering that one. This a question for Dilip. This is for you, Mike. A tenant viewed the property via a virtual walk around. Now they have moved in. They say it's not the same property. What can they do?
So I think a lot of this comes down to the audit trail. Make sure that you've got a good documented audit trail that built up to the tenancy. Keep the video that you did, keep a copy of that. We do sometimes come across agents who don't keep them, they've lost them, they've deleted them. So then how are you going to prove what took place? You can go maybe down the road of negotiating, whether they want to get a release from the tenancy. That's down to negotiation and agreement.
And that's really important in a letting agent's job, isn't it? Negotiation.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
and mediation.
Exactly. So, and two other things I think, excuse me, to say about this. If your agent is also a member of the property redress scheme, there's access to that dispute resolution service through
and explain what that is.
So if you're a letting agent or an estate agent, you have to belong to a redress scheme, a means of resolving consumer disputes. So we've got the property ombudsman and we've got the property redress
and that's
scheme.
your other hat, isn't it?
So my other hat is membership and resolution lead for the property redress scheme. So bear that in mind. Sometimes if you really reach an impasse with a tenant, you might, if you're a member of a redress scheme, want to signpost them to that, because that can help resolve the dispute for you. The other thing is PRS operates a mediation service as well. So
and you do a lot of the mediations as well.
Yeah, that's my other hat.
We have different hats here. We're very versatile. Yeah. So just talk about the mediation, the type of mediation stuff that you've done for the PRS.
Okay, so just coming out of lockdown, predominantly it was rent arrears because that was the biggest thing that built up for everybody. But now, interestingly, we've moved away from that. We rarely see rent arrears as a mediation issue. We are seeing a lot more mediation with regards to access, like we talked about earlier. And we're also seeing more
surrender as well.
Yeah, exactly. More about how we can end a tenancy early rather than going to court. And it's not the case that landlords don't want to go to court because of the cost. It's actually, they are very mindful that going to court and being evicted is stressful for the tenant, and they don't want that to happen.
And it takes a lot of time.
So the mediation that we're seeing is helping both parties get an outcome that works for both of them.
And going into a bit more detail about that. So again, we bought the mediation service during lockdown. We started 4 businesses actually during lockdown. We were pretty busy actually. HFIS and the mediation business were 2 of them. Mediation is going to form part of the Renters Reform Bill. There's, when you do go to court, there's got to be some sort of mediation trial or engagement you've got to try and do with the tenant. But of course, if a tenant doesn't want to engage with you or speak to you, you can't mediate.
No,
It takes two to tango.
It does take two to tango. You do need the other party to be involved, and mediation is voluntary at this stage. However, we have just seen a court case go through Merthyr Tydfil Council, where the Court of Appeal actually did say that they would be able to force somebody into ADR rather than going to court.
Right.
So that's an interesting move in the direction of ADR now. So I think if you have that as part of the guns in your arsenal as a letting agent.
Don't say Arsenal, please. I'm a Spurs fan.
Okay, if you have that as a gun in your Tottenham,
okay,
then I think it's one of those things that you can use as a unique selling point to your landlords. We also provide this service, whereas a lot of agents maybe not doing that. It'll make you stand out on the high street as well, I think.
And we use that experience really as well for my deposits, because we're doing over 12,000 disputes at end of tenancy, so it was a natural thing for us to offer, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I think the other thing, I mean, you're saying about it takes two to tango. Our experience has been that if we can we're more likely than not to be able to get hold of the tenant and invite them to take part in mediation and explain what it means.
And it's harder for the agent because sometimes that relationship is broken down,
exactly.
isn't it?
And once we've had that conversation, again, they're more likely than not to want to agree to mediation. So
yeah.
It does work.
Yeah, I would just add to that as a mediator, I do find that tenants are much more willing to open up about what's going on in their lives, because I'm not a threat to them. I've got nothing to win out of that conversation.
Yeah.
So they're more likely to tell me what's really going on than whether they would the agent or the landlord.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Right. Next question is for you, Julie. I want to do a rent increase on a periodic occupational contract. This is a Welsh one.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Do I have to make a new written statement within 14 days? Explain that a bit more detail.
Okay, so the law is very different in Wales, as we know. We had the Welsh Act come in December last year.
Yep.
My head.
Yep.
So now the structure's all changed. We don't have assured tenancies out there anymore. No assured short hold tenancies. They've all gone in the shredder. We now have these occupation contracts because people are occupants. They're no longer tenants. And there's a new way of working with the new Act as well. So with this particular question, what you would need to do is serve an RHW12, which is your rent increase form. That gives 2 months notice, and that form itself is a written statement. So you don't need an additional written statement within the 14 days for this.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how they've changed the wording occupation rather than tenants.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, and I said this at the NRLA conference when I was on the panel, I mean, a lot of landlords feel demonised because of what's happened in the press, and bad landlord stories sell. Obviously, doesn't maybe help. I'm on Nightmare Tenant Slum landlord, so I apologise for that. But I think we're landlords and agents. We're housing providers.
Yeah.
And so I think that I think some of the wording will change, but I think also you have to change it from within, don't you?
Yeah, it's a cultural thing.
It's a real cultural thing after many years of the private rental sector. So thanks for explaining that. But also to the people that are live on this webinar, please put your questions through to our live chat box so we can get them asked live on air. So what I wanted to do is Dave, maybe you guys can explain just quickly before we get into more questions on why the letting agent audience should be using HFIS.
Okay, so from my perspective, one of the things that we hear a lot from members, both now when the scheme's live, also when we were planning it, was that it's difficult to get hold of other advice lines. Not easy to access them, but also finding that they was a little bit intimidating or a little bit difficult to get advice from them without being told off even by
and that's because there's a lot of advice out there. I know this background because obviously I'm legal and we run a law firm.
Yeah.
They're very legally and solicitor type lines, aren't they?
They are. Excuse me, I can say this because I was one once, but with a number of the letting agent advice lines, you get a spotty law graduate who gives you a textbook answer.
Who hasn't had the practical experience like we guys
no practical experience. Right. So we and as I say, it's also based on people who have actually done the job and delivered the service. The other thing it's important for us is that we give advice by telephone, live chat and email. We're the only advice line that does all three. And our premium advisors also get access to advice 24/7. So it doesn't end when the shop shuts here.
Okay, and we can go into a bit more detail maybe the next slide. And Judy, do you want to give a bit more information?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that when you're ringing HF Assist and you're speaking to the advisors, our advisors, as you've heard from my background, we have been there, done it, got the t-shirt. We've messed it up a couple of times and we've come back and got another t-shirt. So when we're giving you advice, we can help you think outside the box a little bit. We're not only giving you the direct advice about the law that you need, but also the business advice. What is the best business decision? Some of the other helplines aren't able to do that for you. Also, on the live chat, they are manned by us, real human beings. We're not bots. You won't get standard blocked answers. And really and truthfully, I think the biggest thing for HF Assist as a whole is the fact that we can also rely on the expertise behind us, which is the guys in My Deposits, the guys in Landlord Action. We have all of that advice to fall back on as well.
I don't think any other organisation has that, to be honest. Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. Keep getting your questions coming through. So, Mike, do you just want to explain the services?
Yeah, so we have a standard membership which works out at £10 a month plus VAT. As I say, that's for our letting agent helpline, 9 to 5:30, Monday to Friday, telephone live chat.
But for another £10 a month, for £20 a month, you can get a lot more.
You get the premium membership. So that's our helpline as above. You also get access to a range of services through a company that we use called Arc Legal.
Right.
They give a 24/7 legal advice line. That's not just limited to lettings inquiries, but any aspect of running your business.
Right. And you've got to put, and I don't forget, obviously, a lot of our members are smaller business owners. We're not corporates.
No.
So you've got to be so versatile, and they've really got to put a price in their time, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And some of those legal inquiries that have gone through to that have included things like the smelly takeaway opening up next to the agent and putting off customers from coming in.
Yes.
We've also there's a counselling support helpline, which has become really much more in demand now. So that's mental health. It's also counselling. Some of it is around debt, some of it is around tax.
Brilliant, amazing.
Some of it's around just the rigours of running a business. Premium members also get access to our online members area, which gives document templates, legal updates, legal guides. Two most popular ones in there are an AST agreement template,
of course,
and a terms of business for
definitely. And you get that free if you join.
Yeah,
I mean, those documents alone are worth £300-400 each, aren't they? Exactly. Which is great, and they're always updated as well, aren't they?
And then, as we say, being part of the Hamilton Fraser family, premium members can also get access to those other services that we've talked about, and there are discounts available to use those.
Definitely. Okay, so what we've done, and we're going to go through the question now. Julie's got loads of questions that have come in live from the audience, which is brilliant. I love interactive webinars where people are posting questions, and also we can try and answer them. So that's the website, that's the advice line. What we are doing, and this offer is open for about 7 days, I believe, isn't it, Mike? A week from today. Surgery 10, you get 10% off joining. I mean, I would recommend 20 quid a month is a complete and utter no-brainer. That's what we said as a slogan when we first started, didn't we?
It is, and I have this lovely quote from an agent who said that's less than a packet of fags. If I use the advice line, I won't smoke as much. So
no, that's right. Or get grey hair, But yeah, I mean, you look. I'm going to give you some advice now from someone that's been a business owner. I've never been a letting agent, but obviously active with letting agents for over 30 years. It's harder now than ever before being a letting agent. You expect to do so much. The reality is, unfortunately, as letting agents, you are undercharging. It's just how the industry is. It's really, really hard, because I said this when I spoke to trade bodies and I've spoken at events. You're running a tenancy agreement from the pre-let stage to the end of tenancy dispute, whatever it may be. You're doing dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, and it works out at pittance, doesn't it, on an hourly rate? And it's just how the industry is. So the biggest challenges for landlords, and I do a lot of training myself on how to attract new landlords to your business, is finding new landlords, is keeping landlords. But obviously the challenge has been landlords are getting out, so they end up their stock's dwindling. So it's challenging being a landlord, and you need some support, and you don't need to be a trade body to get that support, do you?
No, you don't. And what we're trying to do is help you do less time on the difficult stuff. Hopefully then able to spend more time on the fun stuff or the good stuff, which is growing your business.
Yeah, and it's a people business, isn't it? Definitely.
Absolutely.
Julie, do you want to run through some questions that you've got?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We've had quite a few come through, actually.
Amazing.
We've got, nearly half an hour, so we should be able to do well on this. So the first question is the advice line 24 hours, and how in depth is the advice that we will receive? And that's from Andrew Tenner.
Right. Okay, that's you, Mike.
So our advice line here at HF Assist HQ, 9 to 5:30 Monday to Friday. But as we said, if you're a premium subscriber, you've also out of hours got 24/7.
The extra £10 a month, which is a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
how detailed does the advice go? A lot of the inquiries that I see actually surprisingly detailed. We get into looking at not rewriting documents, but we will sometimes look at documents for you, have a look at notices, make sure you're getting them right. Also, because we've got that more vocational experience, what we do is often ask you questions. You've asked me this question, but that then leads us into something else. What have you done about this? What have you done about that?
I like the fact that you guys personally, like the guys with Dale, who's Welsh, and he's a Welsh expert and he used to do Rent Smart Wales and whatever. I like the fact that you're rewriting guides because it's based on the information and the trends you're seeing. It's really important. Another question.
I think just to add to that one for Andrew as well, the advice is as in-depth as you need it to be. If you need us to deep dive, we will deep dive. If you just need a quick yes or no, we can provide that for you as well. So next question, who pays the rent when the tenant passes away? And that's Georgina.
I'll let you answer that.
The answer to that is the estate of the deceased. So if there's a will, great, then you'll know who the executor of the will is. You'll be able to contact them directly and put your creditor element into it. If there's no will, then unfortunately it would just be a case of going to the insolvency service and seeing if they have appointed somebody that would then look after the estate for that person. But that's why it's really key to end that tenancy as soon as possible to limit the amount of rent arrears.
I think one thing that agents don't do, and it's a complete no-brainer, I've been saying this for donkey's years, is you get guarantors, also get a next of kin, right? People don't do that. They don't think about that. It's just, the referencing now is much more, is much more thorough than it used to be. Bear in mind, a lot of it's digital. Ask for a next of kin, really important, because really then you'll get it could be a brother or sister and someone's passed away. You'll get the information rather than trying to chase around and try and do some detective work.
Absolutely. So the next question, it's got to be for you, Paul.
Yeah.
My tenant told me they have children and it would be difficult to evict them.
Right.
What's the best way forward since I want to sell the house and they refuse to leave? And that's from Michael.
Fine. So yeah, look, we've all, I've got children. I think evicting a family is really stressful. Obviously, that you want to sell, you've got to serve a Section 21 notice. That's your only option at the moment. Whether they can find a place, whether you can mediate. The problem you've got, the biggest problem that landlords have got and also tenants have got, is because people are selling or because they're having to do rent reviews and rents have gone right up. Most landlords haven't put rent up for 4, 5, 6 years. I know landlords haven't put up for 15 years, believe it or not, right? But they've been forced to do that. And of course, when they go into the tenants and actually the rent's another £450 a month is a big hit. So then you're going to have to go through the eviction process. They might even try and get some advice from the council. We know the councils as a whole are useless, right? It's a temporary housing accommodation. So then the tenant will stay until day before eviction or eviction. They want to get the one and whatever. Then they will leave. The problem is that, if they're tenants, they're working, whatever, where can they move to of the equivalent? Do they have to move out the area? And of course, the stressful thing that one has is kids coming out of school, moving out of borough, which is quite stressful. So yeah, I would say the only answer is, while you can use it before you lose it, is Section 21.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so the next question is, I have a tenant who's displaying antisocial behaviour. They have antisocial behaviour. They're refusing to pay the rent. What do I do? There's a lot of answers to that question. Is Section 8 the way forward? Is that the right way to go? And that's from Anne.
So yeah, I mean, it depends how much rent there is. I mean, again, you can still use the Section 21 while you can use it. What's the likelihood of being able to get your money back out? How bad is the antisocial behaviour? If you're serving a Section 8 notice, it's a 14-day notice. Actually, antisocial behaviour, you don't have to give a time period, but obviously that's a discretionary ground with mandatory rent arrears. It depends how it is. antisocial behaviour is a massive problem, and it increased, especially during COVID. We were seeing a lot of landlords were so beside themselves, they were unlawfully evicting tenants, which obviously you're not supposed to do. And I was even giving advice to police forces, believe it or not. I'd be getting calls from people from various different boroughs asking for advice, a bit like the squatters, because they didn't know what to do really. So you're going to have to start eviction process. The problem you've got is it an HMO? What's the neighbourhood like? You've got to take action. But by all means, you can email me personally, whoever that person is, at paul@landlordaction.co.uk, and we can help you at Landlord Action.
Fantastic. So the next question is about rent to rent.
Yes, I'll let you answer that.
Thank you. It's my favourite topic. So is it wise to rent to a rent-to-rent company, and what measures do need to be in place? And this is from Georgina. Yes and no is the answer, Georgina. Like everything, there are good and bad in the apple barrel. Rent-to-rent companies, you need to make sure they are well established. You need to make sure that they are limited companies and certainly not just set up as a sole trader.
Look at their company accounts.
Look at their company accounts and make sure that they have been doing this and your property is not the first one. I know everyone's got to start somewhere, but make sure they have been doing this for some time and they've got a proven track record. The other important thing is to ask to see some form of their accounts in regards to how much money they've got in the bank. Because what you don't want is these rent-to-rent companies, they haven't got the tenants in the property and suddenly they're turning around and telling you they can't afford the rent because they're not getting the rent in. They must have at least 6 months revenue ready that can pay you up front. Then at least you know you're covered while they're getting their feet in the door of your property. I think the other thing is to understand that as a rent-to-rent operator, you are giving them your property. They then become the immediate landlord. So it's important to make sure that the rent-to-rent agreement that you have with them, the lease management agreement, is watertight. And again, as a premium member, we do have a rent-to-rent contract available for our premium members to purchase at a reduced price to make sure that that's watertight. And that's been written by our legal guys at the back there. So we know that's good.
Maybe I can just add something onto that. I mean, I've been heavily involved in the rent-to-rent industry. I chose to try and raise standards and expose it, and I really pushed PRS to really understand that. And we've got rent-to-rent members. There's some really good companies out there like Northwoods. I work with a company called Elliott Lee. They're one of the biggest temporary accommodation providers in London. There's some really good companies that are doing it, but what we have found is there's guaranteed rent companies which are maybe deemed more professional. I know it's like the wording. When I hear the word rent-to-rent, you have a lot of networking clubs. A lot of people want to get into property and they have no experience whatsoever when it comes to managing an HMO is the hardest thing ever to do. Dealing with conflicts, compliance, and paying out money and licensing and all that type of stuff. So I think you need to really do your diligence when it comes to guaranteed rents.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. So the next question, when you do a rent increase, do you have to send a Section 8 or can you just send a letter? And that's from Amy.
Mike?
Well, I think we answered this one before, didn't we? Section 13 would be better.
Yeah,
most definitely.
So if it's during the fixed term, you don't need the Section 13 because you're hopefully relying on a clause in your tenancy agreement that says what will happen to rent increases during the fixed term. Once you go periodic, negotiate, communicate, try and agree it with the tenant, agree it in writing. But if you can't do that, then you're looking at a Section 13 notice.
Absolutely. So our next question, how long after the tenant has been evicted do I have to keep the tenant's property that was left behind? And that's from Adrian.
So it's always been a grey area. It's called the law of tort. I mean, it's what's reasonable. 3 to 4 weeks is a reasonable amount of time. What you'd have to do, and we've had this, like I said, we're doing 2,500 to 3,000 instructions a year. Tenants abscond. A lot of the time they abscond because they don't want to speak to the landlord because they owe the money. There's loads of debts and people are chasing them. They leave stuff. Someone's belongings could be deemed your rubbish. You'd have to make sure you do an inventory, get an independent person to document the inventory, make sure they don't come back after a month or so. You nick my Rolex. That happens as well. So you can't be expected to keep their items on site. If you have a garage, it's wise to put it in the garage for a reasonable amount of time. You need to relet. You need to recoup some money back.
Absolutely.
And we have a guide on dealing with this on our...
Fantastic.
We do. Another guide.
Another guide. Love a guide.
Okay, next question. This is from Jacob. If the tenant is non-contactable, what should I do? It's an HMO and the other tenants haven't seen them either. Can I enter the property?
So, well, I'll give my advice, and you can add. Look, you know what? I gave some advice when notice of abandonment was taught. Notice of abandonment is a little bit of a grey area. You have to make sure there is a chain. So you do your inspection, you write notification of your inspection, you have your trail. You go in to do the inspection, you take a witness with you. You go into a room. Obviously, you'll get access into the common parts because it's an HMO. You'll go in there, and then you'll take some pictures or whatever. And then more or less what you could do is you can put the letter under Lord, see if he picks it up, and then you go back again. There's a chain of events. I think that, I mean, is there anything else that you would add on to that, really?
No, I think in an HMO, I think it's easier because you've got other
Witnesses.
Yeah, other eyes in the room. You know, how often have they been seen? And if they haven't, you know, I'd be first of all concerned. Has something happened behind that room door that I need to be aware of?
100%.
So there's nothing wrong with picking up the phone to the police on 101 and asking for a welfare check if that's a genuine concern. They will do that for you. But as for entering the property, unfortunately, no, we're still back to the point of an assured short hold tenant has exclusive possession, and you need permission to enter that.
But you know what you can do, and I've had this question so many times before. It's about being practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, you can't leave that property or that room for ages. What you do is you write a letter. You'd hand deliver a letter saying, I will be coming to do an inspection on such and such a day at such and such a time. If I do not hear from you, I presume that this appointment is deemed okay. Blah, 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 blah. Send it out, put it in there, wait for the appointment. If you've heard nothing, then it's fair game to actually carry out the inspection. I would actually, because it's a grey area, I'd make sure I'd have a witness with me, right, which is important. Making sure you're not touching anything, you're taking pictures, and then I would actually maybe do that process again to see if anything's happened. I think also when it comes to single dwellings, you have a mound of post that happens, so then that's a giveaway. But I would look at doing that, and again, join our advice line, get some advice on notice of abandonment. You know, you need to make sure you're doing this correctly, because
that's what you said about next of kin as well. You know,
next of kin, I mean, I think it's all also bearing in mind, as agents, you belong to a redress scheme, so it's best standard. You've got client money protection. You also need professional indemnity insurance to cover you for negligence. You know, and that's why these processes are so important, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this one's for you, Paul.
Yeah.
We're currently using landlord action to start our Section 8 process.
Yeah.
Do tenants tend to wait until the bailiffs rock up?
Yeah.
Or do they want to go to court? And that's from Francis.
Right, that's a great question. So we actually have a really good return rate of, I think it's about 60% of tenants respond to the notice. Generally, they will leave or they will pay up. There's a little engagement. A lot of the time, we hand deliver the notices, which has a better effect. I used to be a process server many moons ago and used to hand deliver documents all over the place. It really does depend, and you'll know this. Who's the name of the person? Francis. It really does depend, Francis, what you know about the tenant. If you know that they haven't paid the rent for a period of time, okay, if you know that they're in debt, if you're building a profile up of that tenant, there's a good chance they're going to stay until bailiff stage. You know, have you done a county court judgment search on them to find out, have they got other debts? You know, that's a good indicator. You know, so there's a good the problem that a landlord has, you know, as agents, you're having to give bad news to a landlord that you've got to go to court. We're having to give bad news to landlords and letting agents because we're waiting for court dates, which is horrendous. So there's a good chance, depending on the tenant's circumstances, because don't forget, what is a bad tenant? A bad tenant can be someone that falls in hard times, which is the majority of tenants out there. Okay, their benefits have been stopped, right? Or they, you know, they're taking the universal credit or directly. You can have scammers. You can have tenants that just long it out and try and stay there as long as possible. We have serial bad tenants that go from one property to another. You know, the worst serial bad tenant we had at Landlord Action, I exposed him on a TV program on BBC One called Inside Out. This was in up to 2012, so that was 12 years ago almost. He cost 6 landlords £148,000, and we'd done some investigation work. I'd evicted him twice, and before you ask, is there a bad tenant register? Will there be a bad tenant register? You know, it's not going to happen. But I am involved with a property technology company called Title Guardian, which detects subletting and title fraud, and it's something that we're looking at, which would be revolutionary. But you need to get, what you need to do is you need to get a live API of live data of a possession order and a Section 8 possession order, because that is a public document. and you could get live data to feed in, but you need to get the data from the call. I don't think that the government will be up for that, because if you have a bad tenant register, what's happening is you're stopping tenants from moving, and that creates more homelessness. I'm being a bit cynical, but for a landlord and letting agent, a bad tenant register would make total sense, wouldn't it, Mike?
Would be an ideal thing.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, next question. Does the advice line provide help to purpose-built student accommodation?
Do you want to answer that?
The answer to that is yes, absolutely. The advice that we can give is exactly the same as we would to a standard letting agent. Myself and the other advisors all have that information and experience to our name. So yes, we'd absolutely be able to.
And we have a few build to rent clients as well,
We
don't
do,
we?
yeah,
So we're
we
doing a lot
do.
of that. We're quite versatile. We move with that. So we have various different, and we have corporate landlords as well, don't they? That have their own portfolios.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is from Joshua. Do you see any new legislation for rent to rent and the property management companies coming in the future?
Well, I can say something about that, but you can as well, because we've met with Emma from Trading Standards.
Yeah.
So when I have a campaign or a bugbear, right, and I want to raise standards and protect the consumer, because that's what it's about. I mean, I wrote guides on the PRS website 6-7 years ago when I first joined in. I think that ROPA, Regulation of Property Agents, have been talking about guaranteed rent to rent. It's on the periphery. It's a big problem. I mean, I've been involved with some dodgy companies that we've tried to get properties back when we tried to pursue, that have taken thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds and made a life hell for landlords. So there needs to be something, and it is in the Trading Standards radar. Maybe you can add to that.
Yeah. We have a regular interaction with Trading Standards, but wearing our PRS hat. And so, as Paul says, rent to rent, guaranteed rent is something that they are starting to look at.
They will look at.
So that's where we can give them a great insight into the sorts of complaints.
Because we have guaranteed rent and rent to rent operators. Most of them are absolutely great, dare I say it. But the complaints that generally we get on rent to rent and guaranteed rent is not passing on the rent. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think also people not understanding what they're getting into. So, to put the Trading Standards words, have they been able to make an informed transactional decision? Did you tell them everything? Did you explain it?
Are you transparent?
Before they paid their money and signed on the dotted line.
Absolutely. And I think to add to that as well, we have recently, or I say recently, it was actually March this year, we saw the Supreme Court make a decision on a rent to rent company there, and actually established that at the moment they do become the immediate landlord.
On the rent repayment order, wasn't it?
On the rent repayment order. So rent to rent operators need to be aware that when they're taking on this role, they are actually the immediate landlord. They are responsible for the gas certificates, the EPCs, the EICRs, the structure of the building, the licensing. We might see that change in the Renters Reform Bill. There's rumblings that Supreme Court ruling might be overturned. It's a rumble at the moment. Let's see. But yeah, absolutely. We certainly hope to see some more regulation for the rent-to-rent operator market, because I think, like with everything, if people are coming in without knowledge and experience, it then has a knock-on effect to everybody involved.
And it affects the consumer. And actually, let's think about the end user, the tenant. What's happening is we have a housing crisis. The average rent in London is £2,300 a month. You're getting people that need to rent rooms. They can't rent single units. And of course, that's a much bigger call for HMOs. They're paying money. You get a lot of foreign nationals that don't understand it, and they end up being the victims, because they're unfortunately, unbeknown to them, they're paying fake landlords, or they're paying a dodgy rent to rent company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So at the moment, that's the end of our questions.
Fantastic.
But we obviously can take a few more. We are quite close to the end of time.
Yeah,
though.
I think we will do. So, I mean, look, what I'm going to ask you two guys a question with regard to letting agents. Okay. If there was one bit of advice you would give to a letting agent now running their business, okay, besides obviously joining HFIS, that's a given, we know that, right? Okay, what would you give, Mike? What would it be?
I think get some training, get some advice, but also understand what you're going to be providing as a service before you set up shop, and get the tools in your Tottenham. Before you start.
Good man. You're well trained, aren't you? You've been working with me too long, haven't you? Yeah.
Have you got your templates for your terms of business? Have you got your tenancy agreement set up? Biggest problem I think that we see for new agents is that there often isn't a contract between the letting agent and the landlord client. It's all done by word of mouth. when it goes wrong, it goes horribly.
And actually, we've got an updated terms of business, which is really, really important to protect you being the letting agent, because you know you need to make sure that you know you're fully covered on the offering. What's your advice?
Yeah, I think paperwork for me is the big one.
Yeah.
It really is. Have your terms of business in place. Those terms of business need to be revised every year because your business will change. Your business is a moving beast. It will evolve. Your terms of business need to evolve with you. Contracts, exactly the same. Your tenancy agreements, they need to evolve with you. They need to be updated as the legislation changes. But I'd say the most important thing for me is learning how to communicate. I see too many letting agents that want to sit at their desk and email. Pick up the phone, talk to people.
Yeah.
You build relationships with your tenants.
People buy into businesses.
Yeah, you build up that relationship with your tenant, and when something goes a little bit wrong, you're more likely to get a positive result because that person already knows you. Picking up the phone is really important.
Fine, and I'll give a bit of advice. I would say look and focus on your business with regard to growth. How do you find landlords? How are you engaging with landlords? Are you putting enough content out there? What separates you from the 5 agents down in the high street? I always have that question when I do workshops and I speak to agents. Landlords don't grow on trees, and profiling your database and your landlords is really important. And I don't think that's done enough. I mean, I'll give you one example. I was at, I won't mention the event. I was at an event with 100 letting agents, and I asked 2 simple questions. I said, tell me, because obviously the pitch, the landlord pitch, so you go for your terms of business, you go for your 50 things that you do for a landlord, and actually when they came for you for let only, and there's only 5% difference between let only and full management, they should be just giving you keys, no brainer. You know, that peace of mind. You know, what landlord wants to hear from their tenant they've lost their keys at 5 in the morning because they're drunk? You know, they should be giving it to an agent.
Absolutely.
You know, the peace of mind. So I think there should be a looking at how you can acquire landlords and embracing property tech to make sure that you don't end up being busy fools, because agents can be busy fools.
Yeah.
Focus on the stuff that you're really good at, and obviously you've got staff and you can delegate, but it's about growth and it's about rent roll, and that adds value to your business. So that's my advice. So look, I hope you really enjoyed this. We are looking to do an HFIS surgery every quarter.
Yeah.
So hopefully in quarter 1 next year, in March time, February, March time, we will do another webinar. I'd love to get your feedback, please, relating to our webinar. And lastly, please come and join us. We've got over 800 members now since we joined in 2020. And the advice we give is phenomenal, and I'm really proud of it. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.